Her family sold her as useless, but a virgin Mafia man gave her riches, and then a daughter is traded like a bill she didn't owe. A virgin Mafia heir steps from the shadows with one rule: no touch, only protection. But the city still wants her. She's locked in a palace of glass, guarded by wolves, and given more money and power than she's ever seen. But danger follows. A rival boss stages a public trap. An ambush explodes in a chapel, and a secret cuts deepest of all. The person who should love her most may be the one selling her out. The heir swore he'd never lose control. For her, he's ready to break every vow and burn a kingdom to the ground. Is she safer inside his cage, or is she the key that unleashes the monster the world should fear? When the war starts, will this useless girl become his greatest power or his greatest weakness? The service alley's shadows stretched long and dark against the hotel's brick walls. Sarah's fingers trembled around the stolen key fob as the SUV's headlights carved through the darkness. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a reminder of her father's betrayal, still fresh from the ballroom. 3 men emerged from the vehicle, their movements lazy and assured. The tallest one's gold rings caught the dim light as he cracked his knuckles. "Miss Vitale, Mr. Leone sends his regards." Sarah backed away, her heels clicking against the concrete. The modest sedan she'd planned to steal was now blocked by their SUV. Behind her, the service door had clicked shut, locked. She could feel the cold wall at her back, smell the dumpster's rotting stench mixing with expensive cologne as they approached. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake, despite the terror clawing up her throat. The man with the rings chuckled. "Sweet of you to think you have a choice. Your father's debt to Mr. Leone needs settling, one way or another." Sarah's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Adrian's warning echoed in her head. The Leones will move tonight. He'd known, yet she'd still refused his protection. The devil you know versus the one you don't, and Marco Leone's reputation for cruelty was legendary. "My father's debts aren't mine to settle," she spat, though her body betrayed her fear as she pressed harder against the wall. "That's where you're wrong, princess." Another man stepped forward, this one shorter but broader. "Everything's currency in our world, including pretty little rich girls who think they're above it all." The third man moved to flank her left side, cutting off any escape route. "Don't make this messy. Mr. Leone likes his acquisitions unmarked." Sarah's fingers closed around her phone in her clutch. One call to Adrian Kasperi could end this. But the thought of giving in, of proving her father right about her uselessness, made bile rise in her throat. She'd spent years restoring priceless antiques, reading the stories told. In their cracks and imperfections, she knew how to handle fragile things, how to piece broken things back together, but she refused to be another broken thing in need of saving. "Mr. Leone can go to hell," she said, dropping her clutch and the key fob. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the lid off a nearby metal trash can and swung it hard at the closest man's head. The lid connected with a satisfying clang. He stumbled back, cursing. Sarah darted forward, using the moment of surprise to her advantage, but strong hands grabbed her arms from behind. "Feisty!" the man with the rings growled in her ear. "Leone's going to enjoy breaking that spirit." Sarah struggled, kicking backward, but his grip was iron. The man she'd hit with the lid was recovering, anger twisting his features as he touched his bleeding temple. "Bitch!" he snarled, reaching for her. The sound of squealing tires cut through the night. Another set of headlights flooded the alley, and Sarah heard car doors slam. The man holding her cursed, his grip tightening. "Leone's men?" one asked. "No," the other replied, tension in his voice. "Kasperi." Sarah's heart jumped as multiple figures emerged from the darkness beyond the headlights. Their movements were precise, practiced, nothing like the Leone men's swaggering approach. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos, cool and controlled. "Release her." The man holding Sarah laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty to it. "This isn't your territory, Kasperi. Leone has a contract." "Your boss forged my signature to void mine," Adrian replied, stepping into the light. His face was a mask of deadly calm. "An amateur move. Now I'll say it once more. Release her." Sarah felt the man's grip falter. Even in her fear, she could read the room, the shift in power, the way Adrian's men had silently surrounded them. These weren't the bouncers from the hotel. These were trained soldiers who moved like shadows. "Leone won't," the man started, but Adrian cut him off. "Leone won't do anything, because if he touches what's mine, I'll dismantle his empire piece by piece." Adrian's voice remained conversational, almost pleasant. Starting with the evidence I have of his tax fraud, then the proof of jury tampering in his brother's trial. Shall I continue? The hands holding Sarah suddenly released. She stumbled forward, catching herself before she fell. The Leon men backed toward their SUV, trying to maintain some dignity in their retreat. "This isn't over," the ring-wearing man growled. "It is," Adrian replied simply. "Leave." They did, the SUV's tires spitting gravel as they peeled out of the alley. Sarah stood trembling, adrenaline still coursing through her system as Adrian approached. His men maintained their positions, alert and watchful. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still carrying that edge of authority. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, hating how she shook. "I'm fine." Adrian studied her in the harsh headlights, taking in her defensive posture, the way she still held herself straight despite everything. His eyes caught on the discarded trash can lid, the scene telling its own story. "You fought back," he observed, something like approval in his tone. "I'm not some helpless chess piece to be traded around," she said, heat in her voice despite her exhaustion. "No," Adrian agreed. "You're not," which is why my offer still stands, as a choice, not a command. The SUV's taillights had barely faded when new headlights swept the alley. A sleek black Mercedes purred to a stop, and Marco Leone stepped out like he was arriving at a red carpet event, not a grimy service entrance. His tailored suit caught the sodium lights as he adjusted his cuffs, a gesture that somehow managed to be both elegant and threatening. "What a charming scene," he drawled, his Italian accent thick with amusement. "The lovely Sera Vitale, all alone with the infamous Adrian Caspari. Tell me, Cara, has he mentioned the real terms of your father's debt?" Adrian's men maintained their positions, weapons trained on Marco's emerging enforcers. The air crackled with tension. "Your signature is forged," Adrian stated flatly. "The contract is void." Marco's laugh echoed off the brick walls. "Contracts are such tedious things, aren't they? So many clauses, so many loopholes." His gaze raked over Sarah's body, lingering. "Perhaps we could negotiate more pleasant terms. Your father's debt could disappear entirely with the right arrangement." Sarah's skin crawled at the implication. She'd seen Marco at charity events, watched how he'd parade his latest conquests before discarding them. The papers never reported on those women's fates. The protection clauses ironclad. Adrian's voice cut through the night, sharp as a blade. He stepped smoothly between Marco and Sarah, his broad shoulders blocking Marco's view. "Touch her, and the consequences will be severe." "Consequences?" Marco's smile turned predatory. "I own half the judges in this city. Your threats are as empty as your bed, Caspari. Everyone knows about your little celibacy vow." He gestured to his men, who started to spread out. "Step aside. Let the lady choose who she'd rather spend the night with." Adrian didn't move. "Choose, Sarah," he said quietly, not turning around. "My car, my rules, which you set, or his hospitality. Now." Sarah's mind raced. Adrian's rules meant safety, but also captivity. Marco's hospitality meant... She shuddered, remembering the stories whispered at galas. At least Adrian had given her his terms up front. 6 months, no forced intimacy, no marriage. A business arrangement with clear boundaries. "Your car," she said firmly, "but I have conditions." "Name them," Adrian replied, still watching Marco. "No touching, no lies." Sarah's voice shook slightly, but she forced steel into it. "I won't be handled or manipulated." Adrian nodded once. Without looking away from Marco, he reached into his suit jacket and placed a sealed water bottle near her elbow. The gesture was precise, careful not to brush against her. "Drink, breathe." Marco's laugh turned ugly. How touching. The Virgin King playing gentleman. His hand moved toward his jacket, and Adrian's men tensed. But we both know what happens to gentle things in our world, don't we? "The only thing happening," Adrian said softly, dangerously, "is you leaving. Now." The air shifted as more vehicles glided into the alley, Adrian's convoy boxing in Marco's position with military precision. Black-clad figures emerged silently, weapons trained on Marco's men. The power balance tipped visibly. Marco's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "This isn't over, Caspari. That contract is void," Adrian finished. "Like your claim, Like you're standing with the commission if you push this. His voice remained calm, but Sarah heard the threat beneath it. Choose carefully. Sarah uncapped the water with trembling fingers, grateful for something to focus on, besides the testosterone-fueled standoff. The seal cracked loudly in the tense silence. She took a long drink, using the moment to study Adrian's profile. His face revealed nothing, but his body was coiled tight, ready to explode into violence if Marco made the wrong move. After what felt like hours, Marco adjusted his cuffs again. A tell of frustration, Sarah noted, and stepped back. Enjoy your prize, Kaspari. For now. His gaze slid to Sarah. We'll talk soon, Kara, without your watchdog. The only thing I'll enjoy, Adrian replied smoothly, is watching you leave. Marco's jaw tightened, but he retreated to his Mercedes. His men followed, though their movements suggested they'd rather fight. The car's engine growled as it reversed, then peeled away into the night. Adrian waited until Marco's taillights disappeared before turning to Sarah. The car is ready. Sarah clutched the water bottle, her knuckles white. Your men! We'll follow at a distance, he finished. You'll have space. She nodded, then walked on unsteady legs to the waiting vehicle. It was heavily armored, she noticed. Thick windows, reinforced doors, a fortress on wheels. The interior smelled of leather and something crisp, like winter air. Adrian opened the door but didn't touch her as she climbed in. The seatbelt clicked loudly as she secured it, the sound final as a jail cell closing. But when she looked up, Adrian was still outside, waiting for her nod before he rounded the car to the driver's side. The clock on the dashboard read 12:15 a.m. as they pulled away from the hotel. In the rearview mirror, the sodium lights cast the alley in sickly yellow, Marco's fury still lingering like a stain in the shadows. Sarah pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching her breath fog the glass. 6 months. She could survive 6 months of anything. Adrian drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel. The convoy fell into formation around them. 2 cars ahead, 2 behind, protecting her or ensuring she couldn't escape. Both, probably. The water bottle crinkled as she gripped it tighter. Her father's words echoed, "Be grateful." But grateful for what? Trading one cage for another? At least this cage had rules she could work with. Rules she'd demanded herself. The city lights blurred past as they accelerated onto the highway, leaving behind the hotel, her father's betrayal, and Marco's threats. For now. The Kaspari estate materialized from the darkness like a fortress wrapped in luxury. High walls stretched into shadows, their stones old but maintained with obvious care. Security cameras blinked silently from discreet corners, their lenses reflecting moonlight off the lake beyond. Sarah's legs felt wooden as she followed Adrian through mirrored foyers that multiplied their reflections infinitely. Her heels clicked against marble floors, each step echoing in the hushed space. A woman emerged from a side hall, tall, elegant, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. Vanna Kaspari, she introduced herself, her tone cool but not unkind. Adrian's aunt and consigliere, welcome to your temporary home. Adrian nodded to his aunt. I'll leave the orientation to you. He disappeared down a corridor, his footsteps fading. Let's begin, Vanna said, leading Sarah through the sprawling ground floor. Panic buttons are embedded in every room. Press twice for immediate response, she demonstrated with a subtle panel near a doorframe. Safe rooms are accessed by this code. Her manicured fingers tapped a sequence that Sarah memorized instantly. They passed staff quarters, where Vanna pointed out key personnel. Maria handles housekeeping, Carlo manages the grounds, Thomas is head of security. Each name came with a face and a nod of acknowledgement. House rules are straightforward, Vanna continued as they climbed the main staircase. Restricted areas are clearly marked. Stay within designated zones. No unauthorized visitors. All outgoing communications are monitored. Sarah's suite occupied the East Wing's second floor. When the double doors swung open, she caught her breath. The space was serene, almost museum-like in its pristine beauty. Cream walls offset dark wood furniture. A sitting area faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. The bedroom beyond held a massive 4-poster bed draped in pale silk. Your temporary phone, Vanna said, placing a sleek device on a side table. It contains trusted numbers only. Adrian's, mine, security, and essential staff. Sarah ran her fingers along a velvet chaise. It's beautiful, but still a cage. A safe cage, Vanna corrected. Which brings us to this. She produced a tablet displaying surveillance photos. The Leones have a detailed extraction plan for you. Would have executed within 48 hours if you'd remained outside our protection. Sarah's stomach clenched as she studied the images. Cars, weapons, safe houses prepared for her captivity. Marco's hospitality, laid bare in tactical precision. Adrian's return interrupted her dark thoughts. He stood in the doorway, jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms. We should discuss boundaries. Vanna excused herself with a knowing look that made Sarah's cheeks warm. Let me be clear again, Adrian said, maintaining careful distance. There is no expectation of intimacy. This arrangement is about protection, nothing more. Sarah lifted her chin. And my freedom? Limited autonomy within designated zones. Once external threats stabilize, we'll arrange escorted outings. He placed a document on the coffee table. The terms, in writing. Sarah scanned the pages, her restorer's eye catching details. I want amendments. Adrian's eyebrow lifted slightly. Such as daily access to the estate's antique conservatory. I saw it from the drive. It needs work. She met his gaze. And I want to call my father and a lawyer. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Respect, maybe. Granted. He made the additions in precise handwriting, then signed. After he left, Sarah stood under the shower's hot spray until her fingers pruned. Steam clouded the bathroom mirror, and she wiped it clear to study her reflection. The same face looked back, but something had shifted behind her eyes. Determination, perhaps, or resignation. In bed, wearing silk pajamas she'd found in the closet, she unrolled a sketchbook from her hastily packed bag. The conservatory's potential filled her mind, cracked glass to replace, wooden frames to restore, delicate metalwork to polish. A project to reclaim her agency, even within these gilded walls. The clock read 2:30 a.m. when exhaustion finally won. Sarah's last conscious thought was of the contract on her bedside table, her name and Adrian's signed together, a strange sort of promise in ink and paper. She drifted into uneasy sleep, dreaming of glass houses and invisible chains. The bedroom's silence was absolute, broken only by the soft rustle of expensive sheets as she turned in her sleep. Outside, the lake reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds. Security patrols moved through the grounds with practiced stealth. Cameras blinked their steady red eyes. The night wrapped around the estate like a velvet glove, both comfort and constraint. In her dreams, the conservatory took shape, transformed from neglected beauty to restored glory. Each crack mended, each joint strengthened until it stood as she imagined it, a palace of light and growing things. A space she could make her own, even here, even now. The estate settled into its nighttime routine. Somewhere, Adrian reviewed security reports. Vanna updated contingency plans. Staff moved quietly through their duties. And Sarah slept in her beautiful cage, her sketchbook open beside her, filled with plans and possibilities, small freedoms carved from careful constraints. The lake water lapped gently at the shore, its rhythm constant and soothing. Moths danced in the security lights. The night deepened toward dawn, wrapping the Kaspari compound in layers of shadow and protection, while inside, its newest resident dreamed of glass houses and renovation, of broken things made whole again. Sunlight streamed through the conservatory's weathered glass panels, casting prismatic patterns across the marble floor. Sarah cradled her coffee cup, watching Adrian over its rim as he studied a security report. The morning light softened his sharp edges, though his posture remained military straight. Your security detail reports everything to you? She asked. Everything relevant to your safety? His tone was measured, professional. And my privacy? Adrian set down his papers. Your communications are monitored for threats. Your movements tracked for protection. But your personal space is your own. Sarah's mouth quirked. The staff disagrees. They whisper about you constantly. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Annoyance, perhaps. Gossip is inevitable. They say you've never been with anyone. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Heat crept up her neck, but she held his gaze. Not that it's my business. The conservatory fell silent except for the soft plink of condensation dripping from old pipes. Adrian's jaw tightened, then relaxed. It's true, he said finally. I took a vow years ago. Celibacy and restraint. For purity. Sarah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. For control. His eyes met hers, unflinching. In our world, intimacy becomes leverage. I chose to remove that weapon from play. Sarah set down her cup with a sharp click. Well, let me be clear. My body will never be your leverage either. To her surprise, the corner of Adrian's mouth lifted slightly. Noted. The tension eased as sunlight shifted through the glass, creating new patterns between them. Adrian pulled out a tablet, switching to security protocols. We need to review your briefing, he said. Emergency procedures first. For the next few hours, they worked through evacuation routes and safe zones. Adrian's finger traced paths on digital blueprints, while Sarah memorized code phrases and rally points. His teaching style was precise but patient, answering her questions without condescension. The west corridor leads to, he tested, safe room beta, code 7749, unless compromised. Then fall back to good. He nodded, approval warming his usual coolness. During a break, Sarah wandered to a beautiful but damaged display case. Her fingers hovered over hairline cracks in the ancient glass. 18th century, French. The clouding pattern suggests pre-industrial manufacturing. Adrian appeared at her shoulder. You can tell all that. I restored pieces like this for years. She traced the damaged corner. This crack could be stabilized with period-appropriate techniques. The original integrity could be preserved. Show me. Sarah outlined the restoration process, technical terms flowing easily as she detailed tools and methods. Adrian listened intently, asking educated questions that surprised her. I'd like to restore it, she finished. With your permission. He studied her face, then the case. Granted, whatever supplies you need. The afternoon melted into evening. They shared a quiet dinner in the conservatory, discussing restoration logistics between security reviews. Sarah found herself almost relaxed, almost forgetting the circumstances that brought her here. Until 10:45 p.m., the alarms shattered the night's calm like breaking glass. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. Through the conservatory windows, Sarah glimpsed dark figures moving in the gardens, wearing familiar colors that made her blood run cold. Vitaly house colors, her family's colors. A frame job, she whispered, rage and fear warring in her chest. They're trying to make it look like Adrian's voice cut through the chaos, iron cold over the intercom. Sarah, safe room! Now. She was already moving, grabbing the go bag she'd prepared during their drills. Her feet flew over marble floors as she sprinted down the hall, security training kicking in automatically. Below, shadows darted through the grounds like deadly chess pieces. The safe room waited ahead, its reinforced door promising protection. Sarah ran faster, Adrian's earlier lessons echoing in her mind. Speed over stealth in a known breach. Every second counts. Behind her, commands crackled over radios. Security teams mobilized with practiced efficiency. Through windows, she caught glimpses of Adrian's men moving into defensive positions, weapons ready. The intruders wore masks, but their uniforms screamed their false allegiance. Someone wanted her caught between Vitaly and Kaspari forces. Someone wanted blood. Sarah's lungs burned as she rounded the final corner. The safe room's keypad glowed like a beacon. Her fingers flew over the numbers. 7749, muscle memory from hours of drills. The door's mechanisms, word to life. Sarah glanced back once, catching a last glimpse of shadowed figures through distant windows. Her family's colors, twisted into a weapon against her. Another betrayal to add to the growing list. She slipped inside as the locks engaged, sealing her in darkness until backup lights hummed to life. The room was exactly as she'd memorized. Communications panel, emergency supplies, reinforced walls that could withstand an assault. Sarah pressed her back against the cool metal door, heart hammering. Outside, the Kaspari compound transformed into a battlefield. And somewhere out there, Adrian commanded his forces. His earlier warmth replaced by lethal efficiency. The security screen showed exterior camera feeds. Sarah watched the silent war unfold, evaluating each frame for clues about who might want her framed, who might profit from this chaos. This morning's coffee and conversation felt like another lifetime. Now she was back to what she'd always been, a chess piece in someone else's game. But this time she had allies. This time she had training. This time she would not be a passive player. The alarms continued their urgent cry as Sarah sealed herself inside the safe room. Through the security feeds, she watched Adrian's response unfold with military precision. No chaos, no shouting, just coordinated efficiency as his teams moved like shadows through the grounds. The compound's external lights cut out simultaneously, plunging the gardens into darkness. Motorized blinds dropped over every window with synchronized thuds. On the infrared display, she could see Adrian's men deploying in strategic formations, their heat signatures clear against the cool night. Sarah's hand throbbed. In her rush to the safe room, she'd caught it on a sharp metal edge. opening a clean slice across her palm. Blood-welled, warm and sticky, she pressed a tissue from her go bag against it, watching the feeds intently. The intruders' movements grew erratic as they lost their visibility advantage. Adrian's teams herded them with practiced ease, closing exit routes one by one. Through the cameras, she spotted Adrian himself, moving with lethal grace as he directed the operation. His commands came through clear and cold on the security channel. West Sector contained, East Sweep commencing, all units maintain formation. A sharp knock at the safe room door made her jump. Ms. Vitale, it's Adrian. Corridor is secure. Authorization code 8844 Alpha. Sarah checked the exterior camera. Adrian stood alone, weapon holstered. She entered the release code, and the door whispered open. His eyes immediately went to her injured hand. "You're hurt!" The Arctic command voice was gone, replaced by quiet concern. "It's nothing. Just caught it on something while running." He shook his head, reaching for the first aid kit mounted on the wall. "Let me see." The same hands that had orchestrated tactical violence minutes ago now moved with careful gentleness as he cleaned her cut. His touch was clinical, but somehow intimate, as he examined the wound. "Not deep enough for stitches," he murmured, applying antiseptic that made her hiss. "Sorry, almost done." He wrapped her palm in clean gauze with practiced efficiency, securing it without restricting her movement. His fingers lingered a moment longer than necessary, warm against her skin. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "For this, and for—" She gestured at the screens showing his team securing the last intruders. Adrian's jaw tightened as he looked at the footage. "Those uniforms. Vitale colors and insignias, but too perfect, too new. This was staged." Sarah nodded. "Someone wanted it to look like my family sent them, but my father, whatever his faults, would never be this obvious." "Agreed." Adrian rewound the footage, studying details. "The formation patterns are wrong too, not Vitale training." They spent the next hour analyzing the attack from every angle. Adrian pointed out tactical choices that didn't match Vitale, doctrine, while Sarah noticed inconsistencies in the uniform details, stitching that wasn't quite right, buttons from the wrong manufacturer. "Whoever planned this wanted to drive a wedge," Adrian said finally. "Make us distrust each other, destabilize the arrangement." "It almost worked," Sarah admitted. "For a moment I thought—" "I know," his voice was gentle, "but you analyzed instead of assuming. That's why we're having this conversation." A knock interrupted them. Matteo, one of Adrian's most trusted guards, stood in the doorway. His quiet presence carried an air of steady competence. "Perimeter resecured," he reported. "All intruders contained. No casualties." Adrian nodded. "Matteo will be posted at your door tonight," he told Sarah. "I'm taking the adjacent suite." He gestured to the shared wall. "I'll leave my door open. If you need anything at all, just call out." The thoughtfulness of the arrangement struck her. He was offering security without imprisonment, protection without suffocation. The open door was a choice, not a command. They walked together to her room, Matteo following at a discreet distance. The night's adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But there was something else, too, a strange new feeling of safety. "Try to rest," Adrian said softly. "We'll review additional security measures in the morning." Sarah nodded, noting how he positioned himself to let her enter the room first, maintaining her space. "Thank you for handling this without treating you like a liability." His smile was slight but genuine. "You've proven you're an asset, Sarah. Your observations tonight were invaluable." He withdrew to his own room, leaving the connecting door open as promised. Matteo took up his post outside, solid and reassuring as a mountain. Sarah changed for bed, the bandage on her palm a reminder of how quickly everything had changed. She could hear Adrian moving in the next room, steady footsteps, the soft sound of a chair being pulled out, papers rustling as he continued working, despite the hour. She sat on her bed, listening to those quiet sounds. The same man who had commanded an armed response with cold precision had cleaned her wound with gentle hands. The same tactical mind that had outmaneuvered the intruders had noticed her need for space and choice. For the first time since arriving at the compound, the sensation of being watched didn't feel threatening. Adrian's presence on the other side of the wall wasn't surveillance but shelter. Even Matteo's guard felt like protection rather than confinement. Sarah lay down, the events of the night playing through her mind. The attack had revealed something unexpected, not just about the mysterious forces moving against them, but about Adrian himself. His capacity for violence was undeniable, but so was his capacity for care. The steady cadence of his footsteps continued, a quiet rhythm in the darkness. Sarah found her breathing naturally, falling into sync with the sound. Her eyes grew heavy as the adrenaline finally faded completely. For the first time since entering the Kasperi compound, she fell asleep without checking the locks, without analyzing escape routes, without feeling like a prisoner. The night's danger had transformed something fundamental in her relationship with Adrian and his world. She was still a guest, but now she was also something more. A partner in unraveling the threats around them, someone whose insights were valued rather than dismissed. The sound of Adrian's movements followed her into sleep, not a reminder of captivity, but a promise of protection. She was watched over, not merely watched. Sunlight streamed through the estate windows as Sarah blinked awake, her mind already racing with plans. The events of last night had shifted something inside her. If she had to be here, she would make it count. She found Vanna in the breakfast room, elegant as always despite the early hour. Fresh coffee and pastries adorned the marble-topped table, the morning light catching the delicate china. "I have a proposal," Sarah announced, sliding into her seat. Vanna's eyebrow arched with interest as she poured coffee for them both. "I'll follow every security protocol to the letter," Sarah continued, "if you'll allow me two things: restoration work on the estate's antiques, and permission to shadow you during legitimate business reviews." Vanna's lips curved slightly. "Ambitious. Though I suspect you'd follow protocols anyway, given the alternatives." "True. But this way, we both get what we want, my compliance and my competence." Adrian's arrival paused their conversation. He looked sharp in a charcoal suit despite the weekend, though Sarah noticed slight shadows under his eyes. He'd probably been up all night analyzing the breach. "Your proposal has merit," he said, having clearly overheard. "But it needs structure." He pulled out his phone, fingers moving swiftly. 2 weeks of training blocks first, safe routes, negotiation tells, basic self-defense code names. Then we evaluate. Sarah nodded. "As long as I can start restoration work today. That glass case in the conservatory is crying for attention." "Agreed." Adrian's eyes held hers for a moment. "Matteo will be your shadow, but you'll have workspace freedom within secured zones." The day unfolded into what felt surprisingly like normalcy. Sarah set up her restoration station in the conservatory's northern corner, where the light was best. The cracked glass case, an 18th century piece with exquisite metalwork, responded well to her careful touch. She became so absorbed in her work that she almost missed Adrian's presence in the doorway. He stood silently, watching her hands move with precision over the delicate repairs. Something in his expression seemed almost reverent. "The previous restorer used the wrong adhesive," she explained, not looking up. "It's degraded the original seal." "How can you tell?" "The discoloration pattern. See these microfractures? They're spreading from the bonding points." She gestured him closer, pointing out the details. Adrian leaned in, his shoulder nearly touching hers. "You see patterns everywhere, don't you?" Says the man who probably calculated 17 escape routes before entering this room. His laugh was unexpected, short but genuine. 23, actually. Their banter continued throughout the day, losing its earlier edge of wariness. Even their silences felt more comfortable, filled with the quiet sounds of her work and his occasional questions about technique. As dusk approached, Vanna appeared with a thick cream envelope. "Tuesday evening," she announced, handing it to Sarah. "The Rothschild Ball, your first public appearance as Adrian's untouchable consort." Sarah's fingers traced the embossed invitation. "A test." "Everything is," Vanna agreed. "The press will be watching. Certain families will be measuring responses." "Then we prepare," Adrian said firmly. "Matteo?" The guard materialized from his discreet post. For the next hour, they ran through positioning drills, how to move through crowds, hand signals for danger or distress, press deflection techniques. Adrian's hand would rest lightly on her lower back, a gesture of possession for the cameras, but also a way to guide her through tight spaces. "Keep your responses minimal," Vanna instructed. "You're mysterious, not hostile. Let them speculate." "Shoulders back," Matteo added quietly. "You belong there." They practiced until Sarah's feet ached, but she appreciated the thoroughness. Every detail mattered, from the angle of her smile to the precise distance she should maintain from Adrian in different situations. Later, as she shut down the conservatory for the night, Adrian appeared in the doorway. The setting sun cast long shadows across the floor between them. "Will you trust me for 2 hours Tuesday?" he asked quietly. Sarah considered his question carefully, remembering his gentle hands with her injury, his respect for her space, his willingness to negotiate rather than demand. "I'll trust myself," she finally answered. "You can walk beside that." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or understanding. He nodded once, accepting her terms. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken acknowledgments. They were building something unexpected here, not quite trust, not quite friendship, but something uniquely their own. A partnership forged in strange circumstances, strengthened by mutual respect. She returned to her final checks of the restoration work, aware of him watching from the doorway. His presence had become familiar over the course of the day, a shadow that protected rather than threatened. The glass case gleamed in the fading light, its fractures now nearly invisible under her careful repair work. Like their own relationship, she thought, damaged things could be restored with enough patience and the right tools. "The case will need 24 hours to set," she said, closing her toolkit. "But the bond should hold this time." "Because you understood the pattern of the break," Adrian observed, "not just the surface damage." "Pattern recognition is survival," she replied, thinking of all the subtle shifts in their dynamic since last night's attack. "In more ways than one." He stepped aside to let her pass through the doorway, maintaining the careful distance they'd practiced. Tomorrow would bring more training, more preparation for Tuesday's test. But tonight, in the quiet of the conservatory, with the day's last light fading, they had found a workable balance. Matteo fell into step behind them as they walked back toward the main house. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of the lake. Sarah felt the weight of the invitation in her pocket, but it no longer seemed as daunting. She had survived worse tests than a ball. Besides, she thought with a slight smile, she had 23 escape routes if needed. She'd counted them herself. The gilded ballroom of the Rothschild estate gleamed like a jewel box, crystal chandeliers throwing diamond-bright reflections across marble floors. At precisely 8 o'clock, Sarah stepped from Adrian's car, her midnight blue gown whispering against the red carpet. Adrian's gloved hand settled at her lower back, exactly as they'd practiced, but tonight the touch felt electric. They'd spent Monday preparing for this moment, reviewing protocols, memorizing faces, practicing the precise steps of their planned waltz. Now it was time to perform. "Ready?" he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Sarah lifted her chin. "Born ready." They moved through the crowd with practiced grace, Adrian steering them clear of potential confrontations. His black suit made him look dangerous and elegant, a perfect match to her carefully chosen gown. The whispers followed them like perfume. "Kaspari's new acquisition. The Vitale girl. Look how he guards her." When the first waltz began, Adrian led her to the center of the floor. This was the crucial moment, their chance to establish her position publicly. His gloved hand settled at her waist while the other clasped hers. The music started and they began to move. Every step was perfect, every turn precise. But something else was happening too, something they hadn't rehearsed. The chemistry between them crackled like lightning. Adrian's eyes darkened as he pulled her closer than strictly necessary. Sarah's breath caught when his thumb traced circles on her waist. They moved as one entity, lost in their own world of music and motion. When he dipped her, their faces drew close, so close she could feel his breath on her lips. For a heartbeat, they both leaned in. Then reality crashed back. They pulled apart slightly, though their steps never faltered. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Adrian's jaw was tight with controlled tension. The dance ended. Applause rippled through the crowd. They had achieved their goal, but at what cost to their careful boundaries? Before they could process the moment, Marco Leone took the stage, resplendent in a white suit that made him look like a shark circling for blood. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice purred through the microphone, "a small token of goodwill between houses." 2 of his men carried forward an ornate box. Inside lay the deed to the Vitale townhouse, Sarah's childhood home, wrapped in red ribbon. "A gift," Marco announced, "for our gracious host. The property comes with certain arrangements that I'm sure we can discuss privately." Sarah saw it instantly. The trap. If Adrian accepted, he'd be bound by whatever poisonous clauses Marco had hidden in the contract. If he refused, he'd appear weak. Either way, Sarah would be humiliated, reduced to property being haggled over by men. Not this time. Before Adrian could respond, Sarah glided forward. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like punctuation marks. She took the microphone from Marco's hand with a smile that could cut glass. "How thoughtful," she said, voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. She lifted the deed, examining it as if it were one of her antiques. Then, with deliberate precision, she untied the ribbon. Marco's smile faltered. Sarah's fingers, steady and sure, began methodically shredding the deed into confetti. "I appreciate the sentiment," she continued pleasantly, "but I'm quite satisfied with my current arrangement." The pieces fluttered to the floor like snow. In that moment, she wasn't just rejecting Marco's manipulation. She was choosing her own path, aligning herself with Adrian's protection while maintaining her agency. When she turned back to Adrian, the look in his eyes stole her breath. Pride, yes, but also a hungry darkness he quickly leashed. His hand found her waist again, this time possessively. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of strategic conversations and careful movements. They maintained their roles perfectly, but something had shifted between them, something profound and dangerous. At 10:30, they slid into the back of Adrian's car for the drive home. The silence between them hummed with unspoken words. Their clasped hands rested on the seat between them, neither acknowledging it, neither letting go. Sarah watched the city lights blur past her window, intensely aware of Adrian's thumb tracing patterns on her knuckles. The almost kiss during their dance played on repeat in her mind. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his hand on her waist, still smell his cologne when he'd pulled her close. The car purred through the night, its tinted windows creating an intimate bubble around them. Their joined hands felt like a confession neither was ready to voice. Every small movement, a shifted position, a caught breath carried weight. Behind them, Matteo drove with diplomatic discretion, his eyes fixed firmly on the road. The partition remained up, giving them privacy they weren't quite using, but couldn't quite surrender. The evening had been a success by every tactical measure. They'd established their dynamic, countered Marco's play, and strengthened their position. But the cost of that success was this crackling awareness between them, this new understanding that their careful boundaries might not be as solid as they'd thought. Their hands remained linked as the car wound through the dark streets, neither willing to be the first to let go. It was an admission of sorts, not of what had almost happened on the dance floor, but of what might be possible, despite all their rules and reasons. The city fell away as they approached the lake house, but still they sat in charged silence. The almost kiss hung between them like an unfinished sentence, while their clasped hands wrote a different story altogether. The estate settled into night quiet as their car pulled through the gates. Inside, the halls echoed with their footsteps. Sarah's heels, Adrian's measured stride. Without discussion, they found themselves in her suite, the events of the evening heavy between them. Sarah sank onto the cream-colored sofa, finally letting exhaustion show. Adrian stood by the fireplace, his reflection fractured in the mirror above. The silence stretched, full of things unsaid. "Why me?" Sarah finally asked, voice soft but direct. "At the gala, when my father," she swallowed, "when they called me useless, you stepped in right after that. Why?" Adrian's shoulders tensed, then deliberately relaxed. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw cracks in his careful control. "Because I recognized it," he said quietly. "The way they wielded those words like weapons. My father—" He paused, jaw working. "He was a master at it. Affection was currency. Worth had to be earned, and the price kept changing." Sarah's breath caught. She'd seen glimpses of Adrian's precision, his need for control, but this was different. This was the root of it. "The night I saw you," he continued, "standing there while they diminished you, I saw myself at 16, except you." His eyes met hers with startling intensity. "You didn't break. You got angry." "I'm tired," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "So tired of begging for worth from people who never had it themselves." Adrian moved then, crossing the room with fluid grace to sit beside her. The cushions dipped, bringing them closer than intended. The air between them grew thick with possibility. His hand rose to her face, hovering just shy of contact. "You never have to beg here." The words cracked something open in Sarah's chest. She leaned forward, drawn by the gravity of him, by the understanding in his eyes. Their lips met with shocking tenderness. For one blazing moment, everything else fell away. Adrian's legendary control wavered, his hands threading into her hair as the kiss deepened. Sarah felt the tremor in his fingers, the careful way he held himself back even as he pulled her closer. Then clarity cut through the haze. Sarah pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heart race beneath expensive wool. They both stilled, breathing hard. "Adrian," she said carefully, "I need to ask you something." His eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them, but he nodded. "Do you want me?" she asked. "Or do you want the control you'll lose?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything unsaid. Adrian's hand covered hers where it still pressed against his chest. "You," he answered without hesitation. "God help me, Sarah, you." She smiled then, soft and real. "Then we wait," she said, "until this isn't a test anymore, until it's just a promise." The tension shifted, transformed into something warmer. Adrian's thumb stroked across her knuckles before he released her hand. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, a hint of his usual dry humor returning. "Somewhere between the waltz and shredding that deed, I suppose." They shared a quiet laugh, the intimacy of it more powerful than any kiss. The moment stretched, comfortable now, rather than charged. A sharp ping broke the spell. Sarah reached for her phone, frowning at the message. "It's my father," she said, scanning the text. "He wants to meet tomorrow afternoon at St. Luca Chapel. Says he needs to apologize." Adrian's expression shifted to careful neutrality. "You want to go?" It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. "I need to, even if it's just to hear him out." "Then we do it right," Adrian said, already pulling out his own phone. "Full security sweep, scouted exits, armored transport. We'll run 2 decoy vehicles." His fingers flew over the keys, dispatching orders. "You're not going to try to stop me?" Adrian looked up, his eyes softening. "Would you listen if I did?" "Probably not," Sarah admitted. "Then we protect you properly instead." He returned to his messages, adding, "Matteo will coordinate with—" The words faded as exhaustion finally caught up with Sarah. The adrenaline of the evening, the emotional revelations, all of it crashed over her at once. She curled deeper into the sofa's corner, eyes growing heavy as she watched Adrian work. He noticed, of course. He noticed everything. Setting his phone aside, he reached for the cashmere throw draped over the sofa's arm. "Rest," he said softly, spreading the blanket over her. "We'll handle the details in the morning." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist she was fine, but the blanket was warm, and Adrian's presence was oddly comforting. Her eyes drifted closed despite herself. Through half-lidded eyes, she watched Adrian move around her suite, dimming lights, checking locks. His movements were precise but gentle, as if trying not to disturb her descent into sleep. The last thing she saw before surrendering to exhaustion was Adrian settling into the armchair across from her, his phone's soft glow illuminating his face as he continued coordinating tomorrow's security. His vow of control, she realized, was bending into something else, something that looked remarkably like love. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it followed her into dreams like a lullaby, sweet and dangerous and full of promise. The afternoon sun filtered through St. Luca Chapel's stained glass, casting colored shadows across the worn stone floor. At precisely 3:00, Sarah sat in the front pew, her back straight as a blade. Adrian stood at tactical distance, close enough to intervene, but far enough to give her space for this confrontation. Francesco Vitale shuffled down the center aisle, his expensive suit hanging looser than it had at the gala. His eyes darted between Sarah and Adrian, never quite settling. "Tesoro," he began, spreading his hands. "I'm so glad you came." "You wanted to apologize," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "So apologize." Francesco's face creased with practiced remorse. "I made mistakes. The business, the investments. I was trying to secure our future. You understand that, don't you?" "What I understand," Sarah replied, "is that you're still lying. Tell me about the debts, the real ones." "It's complicated, Cara." "No, it's very simple. How much do you owe, and to whom?" Francesco's expression shifted, anxiety bleeding through his mask of paternal concern. He opened his mouth to respond, but movement in the shadows caught Sarah's eye. The metal canisters rolled beneath the pews before anyone could react. Smoke billowed out, thick and disorienting. The thunder of boots echoed through the transept as armed men poured in from multiple entrances. Adrian moved like lightning, his body covering Sarah's as bullets sparked against stone. He guided her behind the massive baptismal font, its carved marble offering temporary shelter. "No wildfire in consecrated ground," Adrian commanded through his mic, voice cold and precise. "Priority is extracting Ms. Vitale. Matteo, status on the south exit." "Clear and keyed," came the calm response. 10 meters to the sacristy door." A bullet whined past, catching Adrian's shoulder. He grunted but didn't falter, keeping Sarah sheltered as blood darkened his jacket. "You're hit," Sarah whispered, already tearing a strip from her dress hem. "Scratch," Adrian replied, but his jaw was tight with pain. Sarah pressed the fabric against his wound, her hands steady now that someone else needed her strength. "Hold this. We move on your call." Adrian's eyes met hers, something fierce and proud flickering in their depths. He tapped his mic. "Moving to extract, cover pattern Delta." They waited for his team's acknowledgement, then sprinted for the sacristy door. Mateo materialized from the smoke, providing covering fire with precise shots aimed to disable rather than kill. The electronic lock clicked open at their approach, Mateo's earlier preparation paying off. Cool air hit their faces as they burst through the fire exit. An armored SUV idled exactly where it should be. Doors already open. Adrian helped Sarah in first, despite his injury, scanning their surroundings until she was secure. The ride back to the estate passed in tense silence, broken only by Adrian coordinating cleanup through his earpiece. Sarah kept pressure on his wound, her dress now thoroughly ruined with both blood and gunpowder residue. In the estate's medical room, Sarah insisted on handling Adrian's stitches herself. Her restoration work had given her steady hands and an eye for detail. "You don't have to," Adrian said, watching her prepare the suture kit. "I want to." Sarah's voice left no room for argument. "Shirt off." Adrian complied with a soft hiss of pain. The bullet had carved a deep groove across his shoulder, angry and red against pale skin, marked with older scars. "This will hurt," Sarah warned, cleaning the wound. "I trust you." Those 3 words hung between them as Sarah worked, her stitches small and even. Adrian remained still, except for the occasional sharp intake of breath, his control slipping just enough to let her see behind his usual mask. "There," she said finally, taping down a clean bandage. "Try not to pull these out playing hero." Adrian caught her hand before she could step away. "You were remarkable today." "I just did what needed doing." Sarah's fingers curled around his. "Like someone taught me." "Still?" His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Thank you." The adrenaline crash hit them both then, exhaustion seeping in like rising tide. They migrated to the sofa in Adrian's study, neither willing to be alone with their thoughts. "Your father?" Sarah asked quietly. "Gone before the smoke cleared." Adrian's good arm wrapped around her shoulders. "We'll find him." Sarah nodded, too tired to process that betrayal just yet. She let her head rest against Adrian's uninjured shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Rest," he murmured. "I've got you." The words should have sounded possessive. Instead, they felt like shelter. Sarah's eyes grew heavy as pre-dawn light began creeping through the windows. They dozed together on the sofa, their breathing falling into sync. Sarah's hand stayed loosely curled over Adrian's bandaged shoulder, protective even in sleep. The room settled into comfortable silence, broken only by the soft sounds of their shared rest. The estate's security cameras kept their quiet vigil, monitoring empty corridors and peaceful grounds. In the study, Adrian's phone lay silent on his desk, emergency protocols already activated. 5 a.m. approached with gentle stillness, the kind that comes after storms when the world holds its breath before beginning again. Sarah shifted slightly in her sleep, pressing closer to Adrian's warmth. His arm tightened instinctively around her, even unconsciousness, unable to fully suppress his protective instincts. The first birds began their morning songs outside, their melodies drifting through the study's tall windows. Dawn painted the room in soft grays and golds, touching Adrian's dark hair with hints of amber, catching on the loose strands that had fallen across Sarah's cheek. They remained curled together on the sofa, guards dropped in sleep, the events of the chapel temporarily set aside in favor of this moment of peace. The patter of rain against windows roused Sarah from sleep. Her neck protested the awkward angle on the sofa, but Adrian's warmth made the discomfort worthwhile. His eyes were already open, watching her with a softness that made her breath catch. "Good morning," he murmured, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. "Morning." Sarah stretched, noting the clock read just past 11. "We should eat something." They relocated to her suite, where breakfast arrived on quiet feet. Fresh coffee, warm pastries, and fruit. Adrian settled into what had become his usual chair by the window, while Sarah curled up on the window seat, both gravitating toward each other's space without discussion. The rain created a cocoon of gray quiet around them. Sarah found herself studying Adrian's profile as he answered messages one-handed, his injured arm held carefully still. The morning light softened his usual sharp edges, showing glimpses of the man beneath the control. After breakfast, Sarah moved to the conservatory, drawn to the cracked Venetian vase she'd been restoring. Adrian followed, taking up his now familiar post in the doorway with his laptop. The sound of his quiet phone calls mixed with the gentle clink of her tools against glass. "The Leone situation?" she asked during a lull. "Contained," Adrian replied. "Marco's backers are distancing themselves after the chapel incident." Sarah nodded, carefully applying adhesive to a hairline fracture. "And my father?" "Still searching. We'll find him." The hours flowed like the rain outside. Sarah lost herself in the meticulous work of restoration, aware of Adrian's steady presence at her back. He moved only to fetch them water or adjust his position to ease his shoulder. As evening approached, the conservatory lights created a warm glow against the darkening sky. Sarah set down her tools, turning to find Adrian already watching her with that same soft intensity from morning. She crossed to him slowly, deliberately. His breath caught when she touched his chest, just over his heart. "Your vow," she said quietly, "was about control." His voice was rough. "Not about you." "Ask me." Adrian's good hand came up to cup her cheek. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Sarah turned to kiss his palm. "Ask me properly." "Will you let me love you?" His thumb traced her lower lip. "Yes." "Will you let me show you how precious you are?" "Yes." His eyes held hers, dark and serious. "Will you trust me to be gentle?" "Yes," Sarah breathed and kissed him. Adrian kissed like a man starving for touch, but his hands remained reverent as they moved to her suite. He was careful of his injured shoulder. She was careful of his boundaries. Every step was a choice freely made. When Sarah reached for his shirt buttons, Adrian caught her hands. "Tell me if anything feels wrong." "I will." She kissed his collarbone. "Same goes for you." They took their time, learning each other with tender attention. Adrian's control transformed into focused devotion, making Sarah feel treasured rather than possessed. When they finally came together, it was with whispered encouragement and careful hands. After, Adrian held her close while their breathing steadied. He reached for the water bottle on the nightstand, offering it first to her before taking his own drink. The simple gesture of care made Sarah's heart squeeze. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. Sarah traced patterns on his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me, not just the power or the name." She propped herself up to meet his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me as valuable." They drifted to sleep wrapped in warmth and trust, the rain a gentle lullaby outside. Morning light found them still entwined. Adrian woke first, pressing a kiss to Sarah's shoulder before sliding carefully from bed. She stirred at his movement. "Stay there," he said softly. "I have something for you." Sarah sat up, drawing the sheet around herself as Adrian retrieved something from his jacket pocket. He returned to perch on the bed's edge, holding out a sleek black keycard. "This opens every secure door I control," he explained. "Vaults, offices, private rooms, everything." Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she took the card. "Why?" "Because trust goes both ways." Adrian's eyes were intent on hers. "You're not my prisoner or my possession. You're my equal." "The other families won't see it that way." "They'll learn." His smile held steel. "We present a united front at the debrief with Vanna this afternoon." Sarah turned the keycard over in her hands, feeling the weight of what it represented. "Partnership, not ownership." "Exactly." She leaned in to kiss his palm, a gesture that had become their private language of trust. The keycard slid securely into her pocket as they dressed for the day. At 9, they stepped into the corridor together. Sarah's hand found Adrian's, their fingers interlacing naturally. Through the windows, the clouds were finally breaking, letting sunshine spill across the marble floors. They walked in comfortable silence, their steps in perfect sync. The estate staff they passed noted their clasped hands and relaxed postures, but neither Adrian nor Sarah felt the need to explain or justify. The morning light caught the keycard in Sarah's pocket, making it gleam like a promise kept. She squeezed Adrian's hand, receiving an answering pressure that said more than words. Above them, the last rain clouds drifted away, leaving the sky clear and bright with possibility. The strategy room hummed with tension as Adrian spread the forensics report across the polished table. Sarah watched his shoulders tighten as he read, the muscles in his jaw working. "This breach pattern," his voice was glacial, "it came from inside, from Vanna's access codes." Sarah's breath caught. She'd grown to trust Vanna's sharp wisdom and dry humor over the past week. The thought of betrayal from such a cornerstone of Adrian's world made her stomach clench. Adrian's hand slammed down on the table, making the water glasses jump. "Lock it down! Full sweep! No one in or out without triple verification!" His gaze cut to Sarah. "Stay put, please, until we know who to trust." Sarah straightened her spine. "No." "Sarah, you gave me this." She pulled out the keycard. "You called me your equal. Let me help." Adrian's expression wavered between protectiveness and pride. Finally, he nodded. "Do what you must, but be careful." "I will be." She touched his arm. "Trust goes both ways, remember?" As evening settled over the estate, Sarah stationed herself in the security hub, reviewing camera feeds from the past month. She noted patterns, staff rotations, delivery schedules, cleaning crews. Around midnight, something caught her eye. Brief static interruptions in the East Wing feed, always during the night porter's rounds. She spent the dark hours watching the staff, marking how they moved through the spaces. Old Ruggiero, who'd served Adrian's father for decades, took particular interest in Vanna's office wing. His path always crossed the camera dead zones. Near dawn, Sarah cornered Marco, the night porter, as he finished his shift. His hand shook as he described Ruggiero's odd questions about schedules, his increasing agitation since Adrian took control. "He keeps saying how things were better under the old Don," Marco whispered. "How Master Adrian's too soft." Sarah dug deeper into the estate's digital archives. There, banking records showing regular transfers from an offshore account linked to Marco Leone into Ruggiero's personal holdings. The old retainer was selling inside information using Vanna's access as cover. But that wasn't all she found. Her throat closed as she uncovered 2 separate payments from Marco to her father's account. The dates matched both attacks, the staged Vitale breach and the chapel ambush. Francesco had sold her location, knowing Marco's men would come for her. Sarah's hands fisted on the desk. The father who'd called her useless had made her a commodity twice over. First to Adrian for debt relief, then to Marco for quick cash. Her chest ached with fury and grief. Dawn painted the windows gold as she compiled her evidence. She wouldn't let Francesco's greed put Adrian at risk again. The man she trusted deserved better than being stabbed in the back because of her blood ties. At 9, she texted Adrian, "Taking sanctioned trip to father's apartment, Matteo's driving, full security protocol in place." His response came instantly. "I'm 5 minutes behind you." Sarah smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. They'd face this together, as equals. She gathered her files, straightened her jacket, and headed for the garage. The morning sun caught her. Keycard as she walked, making it shine like a badge of trust well placed. Matteo held the car door, professional as always, but Sarah caught the slight nod of approval. The staff had watched her prove herself these past days, not as a prisoner or a pawn, but as someone worthy of standing beside their Don. As they pulled out of the estate gates, Sarah glanced in the side mirror. A familiar black SUV merged into traffic behind them, Adrian at the wheel. Her smile deepened. They'd started as captor and captive, evolved to cautious allies, became lovers, and now moved as partners. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The city streets rolled past as Sarah mentally rehearsed what she'd say to Francesco. No more excuses, no more manipulation. She had evidence of his betrayal and the strength to confront it. Her phone buzzed with another text from Adrian. "Ready when you are." Sarah touched the screen gently. She was ready. Ready to cut ties with those who'd hurt her and fully embrace the future she and Adrian were building, a future based on choice and trust rather than obligation and fear. The car wound through familiar neighborhoods toward Francesco's apartment. Sarah sat tall in her seat, spine straight, chin lifted. She wasn't that helpless girl from the gala anymore. She was a woman who'd earned her place, who'd solved the mystery that threatened her new family, who'd found strength in being valued rather than used. Matteo caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "We're 3 minutes out, Miss Sarah." She nodded, gathering her files. The evidence was clear, the plan solid. Adrian's presence behind them felt like armor, not because he would fight her battles, but because he trusted her to fight them herself while having her back. The morning traffic moved steadily around them as they approached Francesco's building. Sarah touched the keycard in her pocket, reminding herself of everything it represented. Trust freely given, power shared rather than imposed, partnership forged through choice and respect. She was ready to face her father one last time, not for revenge, but for closure, to show him exactly who he'd dismissed as worthless, and exactly what he'd lost by refusing to see her value. The car slowed as they neared their destination. In the mirror, Sarah saw Adrian's vehicle maintain its steady distance, present but not hovering, supporting but not controlling. They'd come so far from that first night of contracts and conditions. Now they moved in sync, separate but united, each strong in their own right while being stronger together. Matteo signaled for the turn that would take them to Francesco's street. Sarah drew a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Whatever came next, she was prepared, and she wasn't alone. The morning sun cast long shadows as Sarah knocked. 3 sharp raps. Professional. Controlled. Francesco opened in a rumpled suit, eyes darting to Matteo behind her. His apartment showed decline, empty bottles, scattered bills. "You look expensive," he said, eyeing her blazer. Sarah stepped inside with her folder. "We need to talk about Marco's payments." His face tightened. "What payments?" "2 transfers." She displayed bank statements. "Before the estate breach and chapel, you sold my location." "You don't understand." "I do. You sold me twice. For debts, then profit." Francesco broke. "You were expensive. School, restoration courses." "I paid my tuition. You gambled my college fund." She met his gaze. "You endangered Adrian, my chosen family. That ends today." "Family?" he sneered. "They bought you?" "No, they valued me." Sarah gathered her evidence. "Goodbye, father." Outside, tires screamed against pavement. A van lurched to the curb, doors opened, smoke billowed. Matteo shoved Sarah toward safety, drawing his weapon, but hands grabbed her, rough, practiced. A zip tie bit her wrists. She fought, connecting once, but they were too coordinated. Matteo shot a tire, but returned fire forced him to cover. 60 seconds, that's all it took. As they threw her in the van, she glimpsed Matteo placing a tracker. At the safe house, Adrian's phone rang. "Your pretty bird flew too far," Marco's voice oozed. Adrian's face went blank, the dangerous kind. "Terms," he said icily. "The Vitale debt plus 10 million until midnight." Marco paused. "She's unharmed, for now." Adrian mobilized everything. Security teams deployed. Vanna led Ruggiero's lockdown. Screens tracked the van, cross-referenced with cameras. Teams eliminated decoys. Adrian stood unmoving at monitors, clenching his hands when Marco sent photos of Sarah tied up, defiant despite her split lip. By 11:30, they found Marco's Riverside warehouse. Thermal imaging showed guards, access points, and Sarah in the old confessional. Adrian armed himself as tactical teams prepared. Vanna coordinated a pincer movement. At 11:55, Adrian touched Sarah's ring. "I'm coming," he whispered. The convoy approached the warehouse. Teams readied as midnight neared. Marco waited, thinking he held all cards. His mistake, taking someone Adrian had chosen, someone who had chosen Adrian in return. Time to bring her home. Thunder rolled across the river as Adrian's convoy killed their engines. The cathedral's stone facade loomed against lightning-slashed clouds, its stained glass windows like bleeding wounds in the darkness. Adrian touched his earpiece. Positions. Teams confirmed readiness in clipped whispers. Snipers on adjacent rooftops. Entry teams at 3 points. Medical support 5 blocks back. Inside, Sarah worked her wrists against the zip ties. Mind racing. Marco's ego had made him sloppy. He'd left her in the old confessional chamber, where she could track guard movements through the ornate wooden screen. 2 men by the altar, 3 patrolling the aisles, 1 watching the door. More importantly, she could see the ancient fire alarm pull station mounted on a pillar, and the loose chandelier chain, and the construction. Scaffolding balanced precariously near Marco's chosen throne, a mahogany chair positioned for maximum dramatic effect. All the pieces Adrian had taught her to notice, all the leverage points in a room. Thunder cracked again. Closer now. Marco paced before her, monologuing about power and possession, about breaking Adrian's perfect control by taking what he valued most. Sarah almost smiled. Marco still thought this was about ownership. The cathedral plunged into darkness. In the chaos of shouted orders and fumbling flashlights, Sarah moved. 3 twists broke the weakened zip tie, 5 steps to the pillar guided by lightning flashes through the windows, 1 sharp yank on the fire alarm. Sprinklers erupted. Emergency strobes pulsed, creating a disorienting strobe effect. Marco's men staggered, momentarily blinded. The west doors burst inward. Adrian's team flowed through like smoke, using the pews as cover. Silenced weapons dropped 2 guards before they could raise their guns. Hand signals directed the pincer movement, herding Marco's remaining forces toward the altar. Sarah ducked behind a column as Marco bellowed orders, his composure cracking. A blade whispered past her shoulder. One of his men had circled behind. Adrian appeared like a shadow, taking the next slash across his forearm to shield her. His attacker died quickly, efficiently. "The chain," Sarah whispered, pointing up. Adrian nodded once, understanding instantly. He gave her a boost while covering her exposed back. Sarah grabbed the loose chandelier chain and yanked with all her weight. The massive fixture swung like a pendulum, catching Marco mid-stride. He stumbled, cursing, but he recovered fast, lunging for Sarah with murderous rage. She backpedaled, counting steps. 3, 2, 1. Her hand found the construction lever she'd spotted earlier. One sharp pull sent the scaffolding crashing down, pinning Marco beneath metal pipes and wooden planks. Vanna's team breached from the east, having used Ruggiero's revealed floor plans to navigate the cathedral's maze of corridors. They rounded up Marco's surviving men with brutal efficiency. "Ruggiero talked," Vanna said, cuffing a struggling staff member. "Amazing what the right pressure points reveal. We have names of every internal conspirator." Sirens wailed in the distance. Police who knew to look the other way, who would document only what the Caspari familia wanted recorded. Adrian stood in the center aisle, blood darkening his sleeve, but stance unwavering. He reached for Sarah's face with his good hand, thumb brushing her split lip. "I don't negotiate for what's mine," he said softly. Sarah leaned into his touch but held his gaze. "I'm not a bargain. I'm your choice." "Yes!" The word held volumes. "My choice. My equal." Medical teams swept in, efficient and discreet. They bandaged Adrian's arm despite his impatient growls, checked Sarah for injuries beyond bruises and that split lip. Through the broken windows, the sky began to lighten, that peculiar blue-gray that preceded dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of rain and cordite. Rain still fell, gentler now, catching rainbow colors in the emergency lights. Water pooled on the marble floor, reflecting the shattered peace of the sacred space. Sarah shivered, more from fading adrenaline than cold. Adrian shrugged out of his jacket, the tactical vest already discarded, and wrapped it around her shoulders. His arm stayed there, solid and grounding. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, letting herself lean into his warmth for a moment. They'd chosen this, chosen each other, through all the tests and traps, through bullets and betrayals, through the slow dismantling of walls neither had meant to lower. They walked out together, past the empty pews and fallen scaffolding, past Marco being loaded into an unmarked van, past the efficiently erased evidence of violence in a house of peace. The medical convoy waited, red lights pulsing quietly. Vanna directed cleanup crews with precise gestures, her face satisfied. Justice served, order restored. Adrian helped Sarah into the back of the medical SUV, then slid in beside her. Their fingers laced together, both needing the contact, the confirmation of survival. As they pulled away from the cathedral, Sarah watched dawn creep over the river. The first rays caught the remaining stained glass, sending fractured colors across the wet pavement. The cathedral receded in the rearview mirror, its shadows giving way to morning. Ahead lay the estate, safety, and the future they'd fought to choose. 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, the hour of new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the infirmary windows, casting warm squares across the sterile white sheets. Sarah sat beside Adrian's bed, her fingers tracing patterns on his uninjured hand while the doctor refreshed his stitches. "You don't have to stay," Adrian murmured, though his grip tightened on her fingers. "Try making me leave." She raised an eyebrow, daring him to test that resolve. The doctor finished with practiced efficiency, applying fresh bandages. "The cut was clean, no nerve damage. Keep it dry for 48 hours. Adrian nodded, already pushing himself up. Sarah steadied his elbow as he stood, noting how he tried to hide his wince. "Stubborn man," she whispered, earning a rare smile. By afternoon, they gathered in Adrian's study. Vanna perched in her usual chair, sharp eyes missing nothing, as Adrian faced Sarah across his desk. "I was wrong to sideline you," he said, voice low and intent. "When we suspected Vanna, I defaulted to old patterns, protection through isolation. You proved there's a better way." Sarah held his gaze. "Partners protect each other. Equal ground." "Yes." Adrian pulled out a leather folder. "Which is why I'm offering this." He laid out documents, co-ownership of the legitimate businesses, board positions, security clearances matching his own. A master key card that would open every door in Mamur Dawif, their world. "No more locked rooms between us," he said. "Your insight, your voice in all decisions. Equal partners." Sarah studied the papers, then met his eyes. "I accept. With conditions." She laid out her terms. full transparency in all operations, equal say in future directions, and most importantly, a mission that mattered. The foundation, she said, for girls like me, labeled worthless by their families. Real support, real chances. Adrian's eyes softened. Tell me more. They spent hours mapping it out. Safe houses, education funds, mentorship programs. Vanna added sharp insights about structure and security, her approval clear in her slight smile. As evening painted the sky in watercolor hues, Adrian led Sarah to the glass conservatory. She gasped softly. The space she'd lovingly restored now glowed with hundreds of tiny lights, turning the vintage glass cases into constellation maps. You rebuilt this place, Adrian said, drawing her to the center where moonlight poured through the restored skylight. Like you rebuilt me. He went down on one knee, offering not an ornate family heirloom, but a simple platinum band, clean lines, honest metal chosen for her. I was a virgin to love, he said, voice rough with emotion. Now I'm yours, only and always. Marry me? Sarah's yes was barely a whisper before she pulled him up into a kiss that tasted of promises and forever. 3 months later, sunshine blessed the ribbon-cutting ceremony at the lakeside shelter, the Sarah Foundation's first facility. Camera flashes caught the moment. Sarah in a cream suit, Adrian tall beside her in charcoal gray, their hands clasped as golden scissors sliced through red silk. Vanna stood as proud godmother, her usual severity softened by genuine pride. Behind them, their inner circle formed a protective wall. Mateo, the medical team who'd stitched them up, key staff who'd proven their loyalty. The shelter gleamed, its windows reflecting the lake's sparkle. Inside waited fresh starts, comfortable rooms, counseling offices, classroom spaces, and a state-of-the-art security system that would let residents feel truly safe. The first of many, Sarah promised the gathered crowd, her voice carrying clear and strong. She spoke of second chances, of worth beyond family names, of choosing one's own path. Adrian watched her with unconcealed admiration. His thumb brushed her engagement ring as cameras clicked away, capturing the image they wanted to project. Power, coupled with purpose, strength turned toward protection. They'd transformed their world step by step. The legitimate businesses thrived under their joint leadership. The foundation grew faster than expected, with Vanna's connections, opening doors, and checkbooks. Their inner circle had shifted too. No more power games, no more toxic loyalty tests. They built something cleaner, smarter, focused on creation rather than destruction. The ribbon fluttered to the ground. Applause rippled across the lawn. Sarah turned to Adrian, finding his eyes already on her. That same intensity she'd first seen in the hotel ballroom, but warmed now by something deeper than possession or protection. Proud of you, he murmured for her ears alone. She squeezed his hand. Proud of us. They moved through the crowd together, perfectly in step. No bodyguards hovered. They'd learned to read threats themselves, to move as one unit. Their wedding rings caught the light, matching platinum bands that spoke of choices made and kept. The shelter's front doors stood open, welcoming its first residents. Girls with tired eyes and straight spines filed in, each carrying a small bag of belongings. Each met Sarah's gaze, seeing in her what they could become. Adrian's hand rested warm against her lower back as they gave tours, answered questions, handled press with practiced ease. They'd mastered this dance, the public face of their private partnership. Later they'd return to their estate, to the quiet strength of walls that held no more secrets, to the glass house where love had bloomed among broken things made beautiful again, to the life they'd built, choice by choice, trust by trust. But for now they stood in the sunshine, watching hope take root in fresh soil. Their empire wasn't built on fear anymore, but on something far stronger, the power of being chosen, being valued, being free to love without conditions or constraints. The lake breeze carried the scent of new beginnings. Sarah leaned into Adrian's side, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. They'd fought their way here, through bullets and betrayals, through old wounds and new trust, through every test life had thrown at them. Now they stood, unshakable, hand in hand, equal partners, chosen family, love's fiercest defenders.